Very good evening and welcome to Power News. I'm Juhi Rajput. In today's episode, we're going to discuss 65 years of independence achievements so far and road ahead for energy security. To discuss the same, we've been joined by Dr. Kirit, Parikh, former Member Planning Commission and Chairperson Irade, Mr. Jayant, Kawle, MD Renewable Energy, Jindal Power, Mr. Dubey, former Director Projects, NTPC and CEO UM Power, Mr. Pradeep, Lenka, CEO Power Business, Aditya Birla Group, and Dr. Harish, Ahuja, President, Moserbaer Projects. Very good evening and welcome to Power News. So I open the floor for discussion. Let's start with Dr. Parikh. Even after 65 years of independence, why we have not been able to achieve the basic objective of supplying reliable and affordable power to the people? Do you feel development so far is satisfactory?
In a sense, certainly we have made a huge progress in 65 years. At the time of the independence, only few cities had independent power distribution companies which provided power. Over the years, we have now covered only 70% of the people with power. Now one could say this is too little, because Lenin said development or communism is really nothing, is communism plus power. And we should have really put a lot more emphasis on connecting every village to power earlier, and also on making compulsory education for everyone. But these are the two very important things in my opinion, looking backwards, certainly we missed. Though we have made a lot of progress, we could have made much more if we had really decided upfront that we make everyone literate in 10 years after independence. We make every child go to school compulsorily up to the age of 14 or 16, and we provide every village electricity. If we had done that, if we had taken that decision in 47, I think we would have been much better today than we are. Today than we are.
You say lack of vision was not there and we could have been much better. Let's see what we planned few years back, whether we'll be able to achieve that also. In 2007, the then President Dr. Kalam outlined roadmap for achieving India's energy independence by 2030. Growth proposed in 11th, 12th and 13th five-year plan showed that though the target was big, it was quite achievable. We planned 1 lakh megawatt capacity in each plan. 50,000 megawatt hydro initiative was launched. 1 lakh megawatt grid connected renewable energy capacity by 2020. So I'll ask all the panelists how far this target looks feasible to you. Do you think that we'll be able to achieve this? Earlier we lacked vision, but what about now?
What has been achieved after the Electricity Act and the policy initiatives of the last 2-3 governments have been significantly higher than the past 55 years. You can take for example that after 1995, when the electricity sector was opened up, there has been a PPP initiatives and IPP initiatives which has really flourished and brought electricity from 130,000 megawatts to today 206,000 megawatts. That's something which we should have done little earlier, but we took a lot of time in bringing this Electricity Act. While the reform started in 1997 itself, the Act came in 2003. Now, second subject that we are seeing is out of the energy policy that we announced, we really did nothing for the fuel side. Electricity cannot come without adequate arrangement for the fuel. We did nothing much on the main fuel, that is coal and liquid natural gas or the indigenous gas. In my view, this fuel got neglected and it was not getting the impetus that was required as a consequence to the power sector opening up. There are a number of power stations which are idling due to want of fuel. There are a number of power stations which are not able to go to the full load also. We have gone into the ultra supercritical power stations, but these supercritical power stations are being assured fuel less than 80%. And we all know from the technology that if a power station is operated below 80%, it will never be ultra supercritical technology, it will be only a normal technology.
Today we are seeing the results of this skewed sort of reform activity that has been going on. But I will talk about another sector where we see an equal failure, that is hydropower sector. Up to 1970, the percentage of hydropower in our energy portfolio was 45%, and the ideal is supposed to be 40%. So, we were doing better than what was supposed to be ideal. Today, if we see, it is 20%, which is really pathetic, considering that we already have about 100,000 megawatt potential still untapped and about 90,000 potential for pumped storage schemes. For lack of peaking power, states, when they face huge energy shortages, are forced to overdraw from the grid. I mean, it's all very well to say that you will be jailed if you overdraw, etc. But the fact remains that you need power, your farmers need power, and you have not planned sufficiently to take care of those peaks. Why have we done that? Why have we allowed this situation to arise? We are in an ironical situation where we are sitting on the largest, among the largest coal reserves in the world, and we don't have coal, domestic coal. We have 100,000 megawatt potential of hydro, but we are going to Bhutan and developing projects faster over there. Why can't we set our own house in order? Why can't we do our own projects faster? Time has come to see where we are going wrong, where exactly we should get our act together and increase our potential of hydropower, the exploitation, from 20% to where it should be, 40%, and it is possible.
Let's take the views of Dr. Ahuja.
No political party is able to envisage beyond 5 years. That's why we are not able to make long-term planning like European Union has done. In 2012, June, they made a policy document for 2050. You know, a Scandinavian country knew in 1971 what they're going to do in 1990s, you know. So there is a 20-year, 30-year plan document in advanced countries in India, because I think a very short-term vision. So if you see, the lack of political will has led to lack of vision also.
And these two factors coupled, I mean, has led to a doomsday of the power sector or energy sector, because the energy sector is a very complex sector. You need to see the environment, you need to see the fuel policy, you need to see the exploration policy, everything bunched together.
Mr. Dubey.
In 2003, a lot of policy changes and all. And now, while analyzing all the reasons for failure, a revolution is required, marginal changes is not going to. We concentrated on a bulk tender, so a lot of phase manufacturing program, lot of manufacturers have come into it, world-class manufacturers, they are going to set up their plant in the country. So we may have solved the problem of availability of equipment in the country. Today we have improved a lot, but a total revolution is required in terms of policy, in terms of improving infrastructure. We have world-class equipment, but the efficiency of equipment will depend how best it is erected and how best it is commissioned. We have not given any emphasis on improving the erection commissioning agency. We have some old same erector which I used to see in the 70s when I was engineer. They are just little, their outlook has changed. They are coming, earlier they used to come in a rickshaw, they are come in a car, but the erection technology, erection methodology has not changed, but the equipment will perform the way it is erected and all. So all these areas like fuel security and equipment manufacturer has to be there, equipment supply has to be there, but now we have to give emphasis on improving our infrastructure, improving the agencies for a smaller thing. If a coal handling fails, the entire plant is shut. So we have to balance our plant also, we have to concentrate, we have to bring a lot of good agency and technology and balance our plant. We have to concentrate on infrastructure, and the largely sir, the most important point I am making, we have to train our people in project management.
We'll carry on this discussion, but after this short break, you keep watching Power News. Welcome back, you're watching Power News, and in today's episode, we're discussing 65 years of independence, achievements so far, and road ahead for energy security. Government anticipated almost 10% growth in the power sector, but the same growth could not occur in the associated sectors such as coal and railways. Coal production is lower than demand and required rail network is not in place. When 1 lakh megawatt capacity addition was planned in power sector, Ministry of Environment Forest came out with no-go and go clause for most of the coal blocks. We want to understand that at initial stages of planning, why Planning Commission does not consider all such factors.
One thing is clear that yes, we have a problem of coordination and coherence across ministries of planning. Now suddenly go, no-go was made. Of course, it was reversed after a while. But there was some logic in this. The idea of making go no go was that, okay, certain areas are no go. Don't try to bring us a project which comes in this area. Then we won't really, it will save you time, because you are only going into making projects in an area that it is feasible to have projects. There are many corrections that need to be made to that policy. But in principle, that was not a bad thing to say. You go define clearly that don't really try to put up a project in these areas. What should be the principle of defining this? That was not clear, and it was therefore it was reversed. And I think it did in fact stop lots of coal production in some sense, and it created some of the problem.
How the Ministry of Environment and Forest tried to expropriate their asset by saying that Mahan block, which was allotted to the Hindalco, that Mahan block is a no-go area, and by the time they come to know about this, there is a no-go area, they already incurred 1200 crore rupees in the power plant. And they made all kind of advocacy efforts to save the 1200 crore because it's their own shareholder money. And ultimately, the Mahan block was brought to no-go area. It was not advocacy, it was brought to go area. So I'm saying, see the treatment of a national company to the ministry directive. NTPC doesn't react because they think they are my father. I need to respond to them. I would obey their order because they're my bab. See the SR Hindalco, when their tried to expropriate it, they made all the hue and cry because they are paying you people as a shareholder.
We'll not discuss the coal scam, but we'll definitely discuss the loopholes in the policy decisions. From the preliminary CAG report, it is evident that the coal blocks were not allotted to the serious players. And as a result of that, even after 7-8 years of allotment, production could not be started. In a country like India, where 65% generation is based on coal, why couldn't we increase our coal production to meet the power in other core sectors like steel and cement?
Coal blocks are allotted only to captive users. So it is given to a steel, cement and power are the captive users. Now, if steel is sold in a competitive market, or if cement is sold in a competitive market, if power is sold in a competitive way, what is the scope of making extra profit from this? The scope is the additional efficiency you bring in coal mining compared to Coal India. That is, if one steel mill buys coal from Coal India and another produces from its own captive mine and sells steel at a cheaper rate, that is because it is able to mine coal more efficiently. We should not penalize efficiency from that point of view. So I think the whole concern that coal block allottees are getting excess profit or undeserved profit is completely crazy.
Let's take a comment from Mr. Lenka.
He was allotted a coal block which was already allotted to Mahanadi coalfields, and it was already under the CBA Act. As he rightly pointed out, he cannot surrender that land acquisition and give it back to us for another allocation. So technically we were never allotted a coal block. So where is the scam? These are flawed allocations of the coal ministry. Technically this is a flawed allocation. Second thing is, which are the blocks they allotted, which CIL refused to develop, because CMPDI is part of CIL. Wherever they found the infrastructural and logistic issues are highest, they handed it over to the private sector plus the contiguous blocks. So the question of getting the favored blocks, question of getting the best resources, question of making the ultra high profits are all in theory. In practice, we were approached by Eastern Railways that pay us 700 crores, I will lay a single line for your coal mine. Can we put 760 crores just for developing 10 million ton mine? Second thing is, every project was allotted jointly. We were allotted a coal block with 6 shareholders. Can a block be developed like that? It has never happened between two brothers in this country.
Let's take your views, Mr. Dubey.
As a director, I also used to listen what is happening to coal mine development. It took more than 3 years to get papers from Coal India. After allotment of mine, it took more than 3 years to get land paper from the Coal India. Then land notification only Coal India will do. NTPC cannot do it. So there has to be a single window. If the coal mine has to be developed fast, there has to be a single window clearance for land acquisition, for environment clearance. Like ultra mega project, you take all clearances, make all the investigation and then allot it. Don't allot it next 2 years. Do all this exercise and then allot it. Otherwise, the coal mine allottee, he will die in taking papers only.
I just like to make a brief mention here. This country cannot afford imported coal. Right now, power sector is consuming around 594 million metric ton, 300 million metric ton. Increase in production by CIL, which is contributing 80%, is next to impossible. And if we enter in the international market, like Dr. Parikh said, even with 50 million metric ton, the prices goes by 20% because there's a marginal increase. So I think we cannot afford imported coal, and this is really a myth because my regulatory policy doesn't allow me to charge higher tariff. So we have to depend upon our own domestic sources, and for this we need this kind of captive coal block to be generated at a faster speed.
If you cannot produce more than 1,000 tons of coal, and if you have to rely on coal, then obviously your import dependence would go up.
Sure.
On the other hand, there are other scenarios in which says, look, push energy efficiency, push renewables, push develop your coal and hydel, nuclear and hydel to full capacity, then you would not need to import any coal. So there is a range of 0% to 30% import of coal. That's what it's given. So there is, to go back to your thing, we have a possibility of developing in a way that our energy security is improved.
On the one hand, you are giving free electricity. The person who is getting free electricity doesn't care for what it is being used. If it is given for agriculture, let us say, there is no calculation as to how much input of energy is going into it in terms of rupees and what is the output in terms of agricultural output. There is no relation to that. If this situation persists, then of course it is unaffordable. But if tariffs correctly reflect the economic reality, then people will decide whether they afford it or not. If today I am paying 16 rupees diesel, why can't I pay whatever your $60 or $100 of coal?
Well, it's time to take another short break here. You keep watching Power News. Welcome back. You're watching Power News. And in today's episode, we're discussing 65 years of independence, achievements so far, and road ahead for energy security. India has almost 1 lakh megawatt hydro capacity, and if we take into consideration the hydro potential of Nepal and Bhutan, it can go up to as high as 2,50,000 megawatt. Dr. Parikh, will you agree with the fact that hydro could be the answer of our growing power needs?
Hydro certainly is an required power thing because it is very flexible. You can turn it on and off in seconds, in essentially or minutes, and that you can take the fluctuations in power very easily. So particularly when you want a lot of renewable in your system, where wind power you don't know when it's available, it's not predictable. Solar is also somewhat available only for part of the day, so you need hydel to balance it. So hydel is an absolutely must development for whatever kind of a scenario we envisage.
Mr. Kawle.
Hydro, large hydro actually falls between the two stools of Ministry of Power and MNRE. MNRE has incentive programs for small hydro, that is less than 25 megawatt. But for large hydro, which is within the domain of Ministry of Power, there is no special incentive program. Why is large hydro any worse than small hydro? That's something that I have not been able to understand. The other issue is that the regulator, when he fixes tariff, treats hydro on exactly the same footing as a thermal project. Same 15.5 return on equity, but that return on equity is not available during the implementation period. So you are supposed to bear the cost of equity during that time. But the difference comes during the in the implementation time. The average time for thermal is 4 years, less than 4 years now, whereas for hydro it is maybe 6 to 8 years. So a hydro developer has to cost that equity for 2 to 4 years or even longer during the implementation, for which he gets no return. So the net IRR that he gets drops down to even a single digit IRR. At that IRR, developers and already many players are moving out of hydro because it is just not viable. So some specific programs need to be devised. For instance, if peaking power were to be properly priced, then hydro will come into its own. Today it is not.
Your time of the day tariff is there, it's an opportunity cost of that power, and therefore you must pay more. You should not call it a preferential tariff. It's an appropriate tariff that you charge for peaking power.
It's time value of that product.
Yes. High power from us, they call it VI cos phi. whether you produce out of solar, wind, anything, I will pay for power only. But when they sell it, they say time of the day power, commercial tariff, agricultural tariff, distribution tariff, they say office tariff is different, consumer cooperative tariff is different. So, this idea is actually not gelling well. For buying, they want to have a single tariff, for selling they have multiple tariffs, and they are not able to match with each other, and they do not want to always keep the system confused, because there is a lot of non-clarity in that.
Let's take your views, Mr. Dubey.
NTPC finance department works that thermal projects, they give much more profit than a hydro project. NTPC hydro coal line started in 2000 and maybe 2013 is going to be commissioned 800 megawatt. So, hydro unless gets a different treatment, preferential treatment, and the bigger company, there should be compulsion to, they must have 10% or 20% hydro portfolio in their generation portfolio. It is not going to come. Not only the organizations, the people working in hydro, they should also get absolutely different treatment, salary and support than this.
What Mr. Kawle said, that you should give the same treatment, it's an equal level playing field you should give. That interest rate should be chargeable for hydel construction as well as for other construction. Instead, we are asking for preferences. We should ask for a level playing field.
Mega power projects policy, which in any case is now gone, it has been scrapped. Excise and customs duty benefits were given on equipment. But if you compare the cost structure of a hydro project and of a thermal project, the picture is entirely different. 75% of the cost of a hydro project consists of civil construction and only 15% is equipment, whereas in case of thermal it is exactly the reverse. So, thermal project developer ends up getting more benefits than a hydro project developer. I am not saying, as Dr. Parikh has said, I am not asking for preferential, I am asking for a level playing field.
Let's now discuss another source of generation, that is solar. Solar sector has got a major boost due to preferential tariff. Simultaneously, Jawaharlal Nehru solar mission has also been able to attract the major international solar players to our country. When do you think solar will be able to achieve the grid parity?
Seeing the technology progress, seeing the price reduction, solar is the key, and it can really take a major chunk of power requirement in the country. But intermittency, I think, is a big issue, and I think land requirement is the second big challenge with the solar, especially big farm. But if you go for off-grid, especially rooftop, I think there's a big potential in India.
Let's take your views, Mr. Dubey.
DNI data started from NASA, and that is not available here. That STF is another thing, some fluid, which is available by supplied by only 2 suppliers. They are telling we have so much market, I can supply you after 2 years only. Now, there is a huge penalty involved with the COD of these solar thermals. So, and the banks have stopped their disbursement, unless you get extension will not give you money. So, that is why we are telling, making policy once and just leaving it after 5 years this project will come, is not going to happen. Every year the policy and the achievement must be analyzed, variance should be analyzed, and a corrective action, mid course correction must be applied. Then only these new technologies will come, and these areas will be area where a progressive organization will start working.
And if you see the overall capacity in the world of solar PV is around now reaching to around 82 gigawatts, whereas solar thermal is only 1.2 gigawatts, 80 times more capacity in PV. And the under construction pipeline of solar thermal is also around 7 gigawatt, whereas in case of PV is around 12 gigawatt. So, I think being the PV is basically semiconductor, being a part of IT industry, we can expect huge efficiency gain, huge cost reduction like Intel chip 10 years before and see today. I mean, they are 10 times the size and 1 time the cost. So, I think solar PV has a huge future.
Dr. Parikh.
We have to look at all options, not just renewable is one option. For example, suppose we push ultra supercritical coal based power plants. A 10,000 megawatt of installed capacity of an ultra supercritical boilers, which have yet to be developed, can save you as much carbon or CO2 as 100,000 megawatt of a solar power plant. So, you keep the sense of proportion and perspective in mind. We should spend really a lot of money in developing renewables, but we should spend some reasonable amount of money in developing ultra supercritical technology.
What should be the way forward to achieve energy independence, or what should be the strategy to assure energy security? Mr. Lenka.
Perhaps the next 65 years will not be that rosy as what we had, though we didn't do so well because we have too many problems at hand and there is no one to solve them. We haven't talked about the biggest issue that we face in the projects is land acquisition. We haven't faced the situation yet about the funding of the projects, the various methodologies that is required for a project, and we have excessive of government influence and interference in every project. Now, I am really surprised from an IPP angle that the next 5 years, 10 years would see a lot of deceleration in the project activities. And perhaps there is a feeling in somewhere that since the last 5 years we have put 50,000 megawatt, we don't need much power. Today we talk about a spinning reserve, we talk about grid having sufficient capacity to standby capacity, merchant capacity. Nothing of this sort we have, but we are just taking solace on the fact that we have put 55,000 megawatt and next 5 years we will do 100,000 megawatt. But all this have to address the first few fundamental questions: fuel, land, environment. If these three are not addressed, perhaps there is no power project.
Well, with this last concluding comment, we end this discussion here. I'd like to thank all the panelists for joining us here in Power News. Thank you so much.